They look good.
Awesome. Hello and welcome to this week's CERIAS Security Seminar from Purdue University. Our presenter today is Dr. Jackie Rees-Ulmer, a CERIAS affiliated professor in the Management Information Systems program of Krannert Graduate School of Management here at Purdue University. Jackie.
Thanks, Joel. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Hopefully you can all see and hear. I'm Jackie Rees-Ulmer, and I'm an associate professor over in the Krannert School in the Information Systems group. And my research area in information security has been primarily on risk management and security policy. So this talk I'm about to give is pretty fresh. It's some extremely early work that we are doing with the Building Security and Maturity Model, version 5. Professor Spafford first alerted me to this a while ago while chatting about something, and it has turned into a really rich research opportunity, particularly for us in the business school, because it really is focused on the management of security, and technology is a huge part of that. But as you all know, it's usually the people that screw something up somewhere down the line, or allow something to be screwed up somewhere down the line. So this is research, so it's really early. We first presented this work December, about a month ago, December 19th, at the Workshop for Information Technologies and Systems in Auckland, New Zealand, and got a little bit of feedback. So this is the second time. And this is work that I'm actually doing with a team of 4 undergraduate students over in the School of Management. We don't have a course that's dedicated to information security. So I just got some that were interested in the research process, and they are Kyle Harris, Yuhi, Douglas Head, who just graduated in December, and Rishi or Emma Song. So they get a lot of the credit for this. What some of my previous research has done is we've looked at the things that firms say when it comes to information security. So we have looked at the textual disclosures that firms make, and there's a whole literature behind what firms say, what they do. There's a cost to making a statement that may give away a position that you have in the firm. So firms only do this if the benefit is going to be greater to the cost. And when we talk about these costs, we're talking about the legal statements that firms make in the United States to the Securities Exchange Commission. So these are the things that firms have to say. We face risk, we face market risks, we face credit risks, and we face operational risks. And this is so that the shareholders and other stakeholders can make informed decisions. Now, as a firm, you want everything to be rosy and awesome, so people will not only buy your products and services, but also invest in your company in terms of equity and bonds and things like this. So you want to present a really positive picture. However, you also don't want to be sued for not sharing all the information that is reasonable to share. So firms are hesitant to say more than they have to about their risks. But we find that firms actually, kind of forward-looking firms, tend to disclose quite a few risks. They don't say that, I think some hacker in Albania is going to break in at 10 o'clock on a Thursday night. But they say things like, our systems are at risk for malicious activity. And we actually did a previous study with some former graduate students where we did find that actually firms that disclose information relative to information security risks actually tend to do better when there's an adverse event against their company in terms of being hammered on their stock prices. So, so basically you say, hey, companies are made up of human beings. Things are going to happen. We're prepared for it when they do happen. So we have good incident response, and we're going to try to do everything to protect, but when bad things happen, we're going to rebound really quickly, and the stock market rewards that. We also looked at the options market, and we got a similar story where what we know to be informed investors, know these things happen, the company's going to manage as well as they can, it's fine, where kind of your day traders, your naive investors, have trouble differentiating these signals in the market. But overall, things kind of wash out for these firms, which is good in that market. So we're looking at things firms say through text analysis or text mining. So in this project, the BSIM project, we're thinking, well, to participate in these activities is quite a statement about how you approach security. These are firms that, are really willing to do what they can to improve their security posture. So we looked at the text as well as some other numerical and ordinal data. So we're looking at particularly at the Building Security and Maturity Model, version 5. There are several previous versions, and this is all publicly available information. And what's interesting to us, it's really an industry-driven model. These are firms that come together and say, hey, what are the best practices for us? How can we say that, we're really mature in the way we think? And its real focus is on secure software development. But when we look at it as managers, we say, this actually applies to your entire security posture, even though that was not the original intent of the model. So we say, really, from a research perspective, I could say that this is really generalizable to other tasks. And we know nothing exists in a vacuum, right? If you have secure software development, if you don't have strong network security, you're still at substantial risk, right? So it's not been studied academically, at least from the business school perspective previously, so this is pretty cool. But it does share a lot of similarities with other pretty well-studied maturity models. One that many of us in the business school are familiar with is the Software Capability Maturity Model out of Carnegie Mellon, where they have the 5 levels of process maturity from you're flying by the seat of your pants at level 1 to level 5, where you are extremely well focused on the process and you have procedures in place to manage. You're really, truly focusing on quality assurance, which makes sense not only for security, or software, but also security. We see it in the business school and other ways too. There's a new product development model. There's project management maturity models. There's, these are pretty well established in the business school literature. But the idea is you may have, and this doesn't have to apply to every single process, you often will have some processes that are at one level and others that are at maybe a more advanced or less mature level. So this has 5 levels. The BSIM model is going to have 3 levels. So it's a simpler model, which has a lot of advantages. The research that has come, as business people, we tend to ask, how much is this going to cost? And what is the value I'm going to get back? And going, from the lower levels to the higher levels generally say, if you're going from a very low level to the next level, there's a huge payoff given the investment required. It becomes really questionable going from, say, a level 4 to a level 5. And so we want to ask the same questions of the BSIM model eventually. We won't accomplish that in this research. But is it worth being at a level 3 in the BSIM model versus a level 2, given the cost it's going to take to be there? And that may not be an answerable question even at the current point in time. So about the model, we mentioned that there's going to be these 4 levels. There are firms that participate in the development of the model, and this is where we're actually looking for a lot more information. But there is the option for anonymous participation, so we don't know the names of all those firms, which from a research perspective makes things fun and challenging. But there are 47 identified firms, including some very big players, and they're not all tech firms, but all these firms obviously are very reliant upon technology for their successful operations. So we see insurance, we see financial services, we see technology systems, and other processors. These are just some of the firms. And so the cool thing about these, knowing at least 47 of the firms, is we can collect a lot of data about the firms themselves and just kind of look a bit into their management. So there are 3 levels of maturity, as I've mentioned, across 4 domains. And these 4 domains are governance, intelligence, secure development, software development lifecycle touch points, or kind of steps along your development lifecycle, and then deployment. So there's these 4 domains, and they each have 3 levels of maturity, and there's a bit more. So about each one, governance is just we think of them as rules for engagement in the firm, but practices that help us manage a security initiative, including staffing, which is something that we're also interested in the management school. How do you staff, and not just staffing your technology functions or IT management, network management functions, but what happens at the high levels of the firm? What happens if you're C-suite, your CEO, COO, CFO? Do you have a CIO? Do you have a CISO? Do you have a chief privacy officer? Firms that do tend to do better. But that's something that we found interesting. Intelligence are really your knowledge management practices about information security. How do you maintain the organizational memory? Because people cycle through your organization. That's actually very healthy to have people being promoted into new roles. People are going to come in and people are going to leave. People are going to retire. And how accessible are people using those repositories as needed? And then SSDL touch points. These are your practices, your project management practices, more or less, within these secure software development environments. And last but not least, deployment. That is really, implementing and managing secure software. So those 4 domains, each has 3 practices. So we're getting kind of a cube-like structure going here. Each practice area has 6 to 12 activities that are kind of clustered into different maturity levels. And we're making an assumption, and there's not a really great way to test this yet, but it's something that my colleagues thought was interesting is, if you are at a level 3, does that mean you're at a level 1 or 2? We're making the assumption yes, because we haven't seen any counterexamples, but they may be out there and we just haven't found them yet. So this is a screenshot from just the website that kind of clarifies how this is structured in terms of there are the 4 domains going across the top row there, and then there are the 3 practice areas within each of the 4 domains. So governance has strategy and metrics. It has compliance and policies, or security policies, and also training. Then in intelligence, these are things from attack models to security features and designs, our standards and requirements. SSDL touch points, architecture analysis, code review, security testing, and then deployment, your penetration testing, your software environment, and configuration management, and your vulnerability management activities. So if you were to go to the website, you could drill down and see each of the activities within each of the 4 domains and 3 practice areas. So just to blow up one box, here is the compliance and policy, which I always think is an interesting thing to look at within firms. So you can see there's objectives, activities for each objectives, and then a maturity level, whether these are in 1, 2, or 3. And each one is nicely labeled, which makes us happy when we're doing data analysis to see that each objective and activity is neatly ruled for us. So thanks, BSAM people. That's awesome for us. But this gives you an idea of some of the activities that might be in each of these boxes. So what we're trying to do everything, but our broad goal is we want to, at least for now, we want to see what differentiates firms that we know are really actively engaged in the BSIM model and those that are not. So trying to answer this question is problematic for a number of reasons. We'll get into those. But we really want to know Are there managerial differences? Because we can all buy the same sets of technologies. We can try to hire people with the same qualifications. That's actually hard to do in practice, but we can try to do that. But we know that firm A is probably going to have, or they're going to do better. They're going to suffer from fewer breaches, fewer things that have to be publicly disseminated versus firm B. And that usually we attribute to, well, there's something going on in the management of the firm that's different. So that's really kind of what we're looking at. Any advice we can give to firms in terms of, hey, this practice will get you this maybe not so much. So that's what we're really trying to look at here. And as I said, this is really early, so we haven't been able to answer all the questions yet. But in our initial kind of early analysis, we started thinking, well, if we're trying to get at that second question, what do we need to start looking at? And in this first swipe at this research, the team and I, we decided, okay, we need to know who the firm is and what they do, because we want to make sure that we can kind of, look across, is there an industry-specific effect, things like this. So we captured the firm-specific factors such as number of employees, because size is relevant. A firm with 10 people is going to just operate a heck of a lot differently than a firm with 10,000 people. The industry they're in, because obviously not only the products and services that you deliver, but the regulation and compliance requirements. Insurance, healthcare insurance providers have a whole set of rules. Financial services has a whole set of rules. Commercial banking has a whole set of rules. So we wanted to control for that. We also wanted to, along with number of employees, kind of get an idea of how big they are in terms of assets. So we looked at the market capitalization. And OneSource and Hoover's were the places to find that. Then we thought, well, who's running the place? And do people think highly of them? So we went to Glassdoor.com, which is an interesting site from a business research perspective, because you have firms and you have people whose association with the firm is not necessarily well understood, being able to provide ratings of the firm. So let's say I work for company X. I had an awesome time. I did my internship there in college, and then, it just, time to move on in life, and I have very happy memories of firm X. I'll give it a great review. And then there's firm X that, is the only offer I got out of college, and, I had to pay my student loan, so I took the job, and, I was just a number. They really kind of sucked, and so, give them a bad rating. So there's no real differentiating between current and former employees, and it's not easy to tell if people were even an employee. So I could go to, say, a cable provider who likes to be trashed in the media, and even though I'm just a customer, I can write nasty things. And that's something that's really well known in terms of these review websites or online review systems in general, is that you tend to only get the really happy people or the really cranky people that are going to put things on. So, but we thought, well, this actually might serve our purpose, because if the firm's doing a great job, we want to know. And if they're doing a horrible job, we want to know. And if they're just kind of like, they try their best. Well, okay, so that really kind of gives us 3 clusters to work with. So we captured the CEO approval rating, which is a number. It's a typical Likert scale, 1 to 5, where 5 is awesome, 1 is crappy. That's not the word they use in the label, but you can poor. And there's also a number that captures senior management approval, and there's also an overall firm rating. Now, as you can imagine, these tend to trend together, but we do see some interesting differences. And again, that's from Glassdoor.com. And we also, from some previous research, knew that firms that had IT executives in the top 6 highest ranked executives tend to do better in terms of information security. So we wanted to capture that again for this data set. So we wanted the number of IT executives, which at a lot of firms is still 0, that the CIO is not even in the top 6. So, but if they were a firm that had a CIO and a CISO, Chief Information Security Officer, and maybe even a Chief Privacy Officer, having your top ranks. We wanted to capture that as well. We wanted to make sure that they were paid well, or how much were they paid, because again, we did some previous research that says firms do better when you pay your IT executives better. Oh, gosh, that's good news for all of us, right, being in IT. And also, my research team is actually 3/5 female, and there is some interesting research out of the finance literature that said that female hedge fund managers actually tend to get better returns over time because they are risk averse rather than risk seeking as a sample. Not every female is risk averse, not every male is risk seeking, obviously, but they're thinking, wouldn't it be funny if where we see a lot of female IT executives, that firms maybe do better in terms of managing their risk, and we'll get to that punchline. But that data is all available through the ExecuComp database that we have here at Purdue. We also wanted to know, how does the firm formally communicate to regulators and shareholders and stakeholders about risk? So the risk factors that firms disclose, and they don't have to disclose everything, but they can choose to disclose ones on their 10K if they're a US-based firm, or a 20F form that's filed with the SEC if they're in an international firm. And of course, we can only collect those for publicly traded firms, because if you're not a public firm, you don't have to disclose that information. But we were able to identify 234 relevant risk factors from 34 of the 47 publicly named firms. And so you can start to see the conundrum as researchers that we face with the anonymous capability of the model, because we know there's firms out there that participate, but we can't capture any data and we can't add it to our data set. So that's a bummer for us. It's probably here nor there for the firms. So IT-related risk factors would be things like, our data center is located near major fault lines in California or Washington State. Due to the nature of our business, especially like financial services, we're kind of a hacker magnet, things like that. And then we wanted to know what has been the exposure, at least the ones we know about, to information security incidents or events. So, and again, my colleagues like to beat me up and the other information security researchers and management, because everybody knows that there's a lot more breaches than are ever reported. But we can't read people's minds, so we can't get at that data. We use datalossdb.org, which has become a much richer source of data with the various data loss notification laws, and I think we'll see some more activity on that front. And then incidents that may not be a data loss incident, or may happen outside of a jurisdiction that has this type of regulatory requirement, things like they stole some important patent application, or they stole our strategy documents. So we use LexisNexis to search for incidents such as that. And as you might imagine, there were a lot more data loss incidents and rather than intellectual property loss events. But there were some in there, and we included them in the data set. So those are the things that we're looking at currently. And of course, we probably can collect even more data about different aspects of the firm. But those are the ones that are kind of what we call low-hanging fruit from a research perspective. They're pretty easy to get, either screen scraping or getting from a data source here at Purdue. So the first thing we looked at was the BSIM participating identified firms themselves. And we thought, well, what are these firms like, and are they similar in their thinking, or are they different? So the first thing we did is we actually took a lot of that data that was numeric or ordinal, and did some basic regression analysis to see if things were different. And these firms are they kind of, even though they're in different industries, and there's some big differences between these firms, are pretty similar, or we can say there were not many significant differences. So what we did is we went back and say, well, do they kind of talk the same way? And in order to do that, we ran a cluster analysis on the text. And what happens in a cluster analysis on a text? It's similar to when you cluster numeric data, but we're looking for phrases, sentences that are similar. They don't have to use the exact language, but they're similar semantically. So if I say the apple is red and someone else says the apple is rouge, those two things mean the same thing, basically. So what happened was, first of all, we had convergence, meaning it found similar categories of text among these risk factors that were disclosed, and we experimentally varied this to find the best or the least mean squared error, and we came up with the optimal number is 5 clusters, and these are just ID'd by the, we use SAS text miner for this, and it just applied a ID. Really, the biggest cluster, the number of phrases that was the most across all the firms participating that we know about is cluster number 3, which is timely development market. These are companies that have some sort of product or service that they're offering, and they actually, the market concerns them very much. And so we thought, well, that's interesting that, security is not their top one. But as we go further, and software is in that cluster, the next biggest one is the cluster ID number 1, which is breach, personal attack, security. So this is a big concern, and there really wasn't that much difference in size between cluster number 3 and cluster number 1. 3, 4, and 5 were together much smaller, but they were also significant. The next biggest cluster was cluster 5, which was intellectual property and copyright and infringement. So companies are not only protecting their data, but they know it goes beyond that. We have to protect everything that makes our firm valuable, which is usually, data is important, but if you can't come up with the next iteration of your product, if you can't bring that drug to market, you're not going to exist as a company much longer, or at least not as a very successful one. So we thought, well, that's pretty cool, and that kind of dovetails nicely with some previous work. And then cluster 4 is the 4th largest, and that is your natural disasters, your floods, your interruptions. And then finally, cluster 2 is, we thought this was kind of interesting that popped up, is the risk involved with using other people's software as part of your own products and services. For example, you use an open source product. Let's say you license MySQL for something. Okay, if it's a huge vulnerability is found in that software, that can impact your operations. And there's a lot of great open source software that firms find very attractive to use, where it could be that we have the software vended. And if our vendor goes belly up, or it turns out there's this thing's full of holes that we didn't detect, they can be in a lot of trouble because the end customer can't differentiate what's Microsoft's product versus something they might have included as a third party. So, I don't care. Obviously, you can spin it all you want, but the customer's going to associate the brand with the problem as opposed to a third party. So we thought, okay, that's a good start. Then we wanted to see where the firm is focusing in terms of those risk factors. The BSIM model includes 12 must-do activities, and these are listed, but identify the gate locations, gathering the necessary artifact or information, privacy, culture of security, which means you provide awareness training, create your data classification scheme and your inventory, build and publish your features, security features, create your standards, perform your feature reviews, use automated tools along with manual tools, drive tests with requirements and features, external penetration tests. These are things that most people know that they should be doing, but not all do. Ensure that the basics are in place for host and network security, and then identify the bugs during operations and feed them back to development. And that is a big problem for a lot of firms today. But these are what the BSIM firms identify as kind of the must-do. And so we wanted to see, okay, are they practicing what they preach, or are they preaching what they practice? And that's kind of a chicken and egg question, but we decided, well, let's look at what they say in their communications, their risk disclosures. And, you know, once we thought it was a good idea at first, and then we kind of went back and said, well, maybe not. And the results kind of reinforced that when we look at those BSIM must-do activities, they're pretty operational in nature. And the risk disclosures are meant to be more strategic in nature. So if we kind of look at the continuum from the strategic to the operational, these are really capturing more the operational. Although we see the first must-do activity, which is establish those SSDL gates. We find that the number of firms participating, and this is data from BSIM, not from me, is about 85%. But when we search through basically we ran another analysis using text miner, looking for any associations, we don't find anything in the risk disclosures. But you think, well, firms probably wouldn't say anything that specific in their risk disclosures. So we're actually collecting a whole nother set of data to see if we can rerun this analysis on something that's a little bit more operational in nature. But as we go down, we do actually see some what we would call pretty good alignment. Privacy is an important topic because firms generally want to do the right things when it comes to managing or engaging with their customers and clients. And we do see that they're saying they're participating at 78%, and they do say that to a small extent, about 13%, within their risk factor disclosures. As we go down, promoting a security culture, I thought that was interesting that even popped up, because I thought, are they going to really talk about that? But they do. 75% of the BSIM firms say they do it in the BSIM literature, but 27% say they do in their risk factor disclosures, which actually I thought was pretty interesting. It's even mentioned there. Prioritizing, that actually picked up 29% in the risk factors versus 64% saying they actually do practice that. Creating proactive security guidance, 30% refer to it in some way. They don't use those exact words, but close enough semantically, versus 81% say they do that. Meet the demand for security features and creating standards. 40% disclose that in their formal risk communications. We thought that was pretty cool. And so, they kind of are practicing what we preach. We actually need a better data set to reinforce that. So then we started looking back at the numeric data and the ordinal data, and we did want to look, as I mentioned before, we didn't see all that much difference. But my research assistants really were curious about this gender question, and so we figured, well, if there's more females on the IT, in the top group, and more of them are female, they should be less risk averse, meaning they should have reduced risk exposure and fewer security breaches. Well, it turns out that the relationship wasn't quite significant in the data, but we do see the right relationship. So if we collect more data, we actually should be able to get we should see significant results, but don't take me to the bank on that. One of the problems was we don't have many female executives in the sample. Most firms had 0, although Aetna, not surprising being a healthcare-related insurance firm, did have 42% of top executives being female, top IT executives being female. Not surprising, the bigger you are, just the more target you are. So number of employees was positively correlated, but we had a lot of multicollinearity in the data, which means we got to kind of do some feature selection to get the statistics to actually make more sense. And we did find that, again, the relationship was going in the right way, but the better people rate you on Glassdoor, the fewer number of breach reports that were collected from the media sources. So again, not significant, but that actually, hey, a better run firm is going to be better run in multiple dimensions, not just the security, or not just how many parties you throw for your employees. So that's good. So the firms themselves are fairly consistent managerially from what we can find. And that kind of leads us to, these firms, generally speaking, are going to have an overall higher quality of managing people and procedures and processes in place. So what we're currently doing, because I said this was really early, is we've collected a match set. So we now have the set of firms that we don't have any indication. Now that does, again, from a statistics point of view, it's a little rough because they could be participating in BSEM and we just can't find any public trace of it. But we've come up with a match set. So for each BSEM firm, we've collected 3 to 5 kind of control firms, if you will. And we're starting to do the statistics to see what the real differences are. And we don't have the gender one, but we already know that the Glassdoor ratings aren't quite as high on these. Number of breaches, it looks, actually there's fewer breaches, but the types are a little bit more concerning in the number of records lost. So that's kind of where we are. Oh, and I'm early, but we would really like to, well, we'll keep going on that, but any questions that you may have? Yes?
So, the list of firms that you actually looked at, most of them have the capability to offload their risk. So, majority of their IT services, if they were to outsource it, their risk would be a lot more mature. So, by the BC model, they would look a lot more secure. But if you were to look at these companies on one side, have you also looked at companies that have risk intrinsically to them in terms of IT security? For example, who were the ones who designed BSEM, or McAfee, or Google, for example, which has a big security interest, but it's not. I mean, it needs to posture itself with security. Have you seen anything about? For them, the BC model might not even apply.
Right, so that's a great question about being able to offload risk, or firms that we know. Google used to, they're not listed currently, but we kind of took them out because it's Google.
That was just an example.
No, that's a good example. The IT outsourcing question is a very interesting one. What we're seeing actually, and that's kind of a tricky one for us because it's a really dynamic environment. We're seeing a lot of firms insourcing again. And so I've got some colleagues at UIUC in Michigan State that actually look at contracts and insourcing, outsourcing. So I might ping them and see what their perspective is. But we're seeing that a lot of this stuff's very fluid right now. So it's kind of hard to make any useful statements. One thing, in the risk factors that they disclose when things are not specific systems or processes, but they talk a lot about third-party vendors, which we can kind of take to be outsourcing firms for at least some of them. And they're very concerned about that because you can't completely outsource your risk. Because I still have, if it's my product that has, a module that someone else designed in it and it's bad, I still get sued. So, but that I think is an interesting kind of deeper perspective to take. Thank you.
If you ask questions, make sure you use the microphone, please.
Any other questions? Yes.
So as you look at management's decisions in terms of this is what we get, this is what it costs us, is there anything that you crank in there in terms of risk? So it is possible that you overspend on something that has a highly unlikely possibility of happening to the detriment of other things that are more likely to happen.
That's kind of the golden ring, really. because we know that unless you're McAfee or a security company, every dollar that you spend on security may be a dollar that you can't spend on R&D or compensation or market development. So it is a really tough position for companies to figure out what is that best balance. And research-wise, I think you're seeing people ask the question, but the only answers we've gotten have been from game theory models, which we all know are so abstract, they don't really apply that much to reality. There's been some work out of Maryland where, which is really kind of what we all cite all the time, where there is what they call kind of the classic smokestack, where you do have to look at the marginal benefit versus the marginal cost of every dollar invested beyond what would bankrupt your company, so beyond the catastrophic. But it's not becoming, I think the catastrophic and the not catastrophic is not clearly demarcated, because something that seems little, we've seen really snowball. So I think in practice, figuring out what is what can be very murky at best. But yeah, that's something that we're really, really curious about. Do you invest up to a level 3 or maybe even beyond? What does that get you? Does that get you the ability to sleep at night? Or does it take so much resource away from other vital functions of the firm that you go into the death spiral? So that's what we're all interested in. So great question. Joel?
You were identifying some of the traits early in the presentation that I identified better. Has it been looked at tenure of security employees? I mean, if that makes a thing, I'm making huge assumptions here, but I mean, if you have constant turnover, even if you're paying well, maybe people leave for other reasons. Has that been looked at in the research?
Yes, actually, 2 of my former PhD students and I looked at that very question, and we found that there's kind of a golden area. If the turnover is really high, that's not good, because nobody's paying it. There's a learning curve with all of these things, and you can't get acclimated enough to make some decisions that stick. If you stay too long, that's usually not a really good sign either. We didn't have enough data because there weren't enough IT executives in our samples, and we had a pretty good sized sample to really tell what that ideal tenure is. But we know that if it's less than, I think, 18 months, that's not good. And I'll have to look back at the paper, but kind of the usual rules of thumb applied. After 5 to 7 years, people kind of get stale. Yeah, but we looked at, and we just found so few firms had IT executives in those top 6. We were shocked because we thought we'd find CIOs and CISOs and chief privacy officers, chief knowledge officers. We thought we'd have all this data to look with, and we went through everything for US-based firms because we're also looking at compensation. It had to be publicly available so we could get the compensation data, and we were sorely disappointed by what we found or what we couldn't find.
Of those firms that did have a information officer or a security officer in the top 6, does this look like this is a trend that is increasing, or does it look like it's been a constant that you either do or you don't?
We didn't have time series data, so we couldn't look at changes over time. We took snapshots. We know that just tracking the media that we are seeing more. At the first PlayStation hack, Sony didn't have a CIO. And I'm not sure a lot has changed there, but.
And the one they hired just left.
Yeah, well, yeah. So, that's just one firm, but, and they actually weren't in our data set. We just kind of looked at that on the side. But Yeah, there's a lot more interest, and I think the law regulation is kind of pushing this to firms' attention at greater levels than in the past. We thought TJ Maxx was it, and then it's Target was it, Home Depot, you know. But it's getting there. It's improving. Yeah.
Do you also consider the mergers and acquisitions and how the risks are going to be different? Say there was an example of, say, some of these financial, like, let's say, Lindwall, which was taken over by MF Global, and then they robbed the individual accounts, and then maybe they paid it back or not. Do you consider those risks or not?
We don't consider that, but that's something that, because we didn't do, we weren't trying to nail down a specific change at one point of time, but that's like outsourcing or trying to outsource your risk. That's something that we need to take into consideration, because that could, you acquire a firm or you merge because you think there's some value to be gained that's going to outweigh the cost of the transactions, but it's a really good question. How does that change your security posture? And that's something we'll have to look at. That's a great observation. Thanks. I saw some more hands.
This may be slightly tangential, but have you observed some kind of correlation between companies moving their data and computation to the cloud and a higher risk factor that they have, or is it something that you observe that they put in their disclaimers, just like the question about having vendors, and then so is cloud a factor that is something that you have looked at or correlated?
We didn't find it, but I think it's because we weren't looking in the right place. When we start looking at the more operational information coming from firms, that might be something we pick up. That's not, people are very interested in that topic, though, because that's kind of an open question right now. Good. Tangential, but very useful. Thank you. Yeah.
You mentioned earlier, like Target and Home Depot and all these companies that have issues. Have you done any look to see whether other companies are reevaluating their processes when something bad happens to someone else? Is that part of this research, or?
It's not part of this research, but we know that happens. We talk to our friends in the consulting world, and they help companies do that. So yeah, business for them is really good. Great question. Yeah, I think that's pretty. We've got a group of IS researchers that look, and they call it fads in IT. So it's like when SAP, R3 first became a real big thing. Firms were just all jumping, were a bandwagon effect. Oh, I got to have SAP. Why? Well, because that guy's got SAP. And we saw firms bankrupted by trying to, and it's not SAP. It's it's just the nature of the beast. We saw firms fail because of an ERP implementation gone bad. It just sucked so many resources in, the firm couldn't survive. So there's negative bandwagon effects and there's positive bandwagon effects. So this would be an example where, yeah, I'm sure firms are, oh my gosh, could that happen to us? And could be, so yeah. Plus there's things like PCI compliance, the regulators and auditors are gonna get feisty and, look more closely, which is a positive thing. Okay, anything else? Well, I really appreciated all your feedback, really useful. I'm gonna take that back to the team and we're gonna keep going. So thanks a lot, everybody.